Order. Order. Chris Stevens to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Pritchard. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I wish to move the motion, and I'll also be referring to colleagues in the House as to my register of members' interests, particularly my position as chair of the PCS parliamentary group, as I'll be mentioning some issues as they appertain to the staff who work in the Department of Work and Pensions. Mr Pritchard, there's probably three components to what I want to raise this afternoon. The first one is the latest figures and sanctions, the policy itself and some of those challenges, and the pressures that apply on the staff of the Department of Work and Pensions. Now, can I say firstly, the latest figures on sanctions are shocking. And a written question that I had laid down, it's question 88916. I asked how many benefit claims were subject to sanctions in the last 3 months for which data was available by constituency, how much was A, the total, and B, the average sum of benefit income lost by claimants due to sanctions in each constituency, and members can refer to that particular written question and answer. In June 22, just over 34 million in Great Britain was clawed back by the DWP. In July, it was 34.9 million, and in August 2022, it was over 36 million was clawed back in sanctions. So the figures are increasing month to month, and in Scotland, the August figure was 2.3 million. In Glasgow South West, the figure was 57,000 a month, with the average deduction being £262 a month in August this year, a considerable sum of money, I would argue, Mr Pritchard, to deduct from someone's social security. It does suggest that the aggressive attitude we saw between 2013 to 2015 is back amongst us. And the raising of the administrative earnings threshold means that 600,000 more claimants could be subject to a sanction, and this will include raising the number of people responsible for delivering the benefits being sanctioned, as I will come on to. Now, we'll know the history of this, Mr Pritchard. The coalition government said in its welfare reform bill in 2012 that it would lay the foundation for a clearer and stronger sanctions system that will act more as an effective deterrent to non-compliance. And they made changes in three main areas. They extended the scope of conditionality and sanctions within the same claimant groups, and they then increased the length of sanction for certain groups, and they introduced the concept of escalating sanctions with longer sanction periods for second and third sanctionable failures within a 12-month period. However, the then Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Amber Rudd, had concluded that 3-year sanctions, while rarely used, were counterproductive and ultimately undermined the goal of supporting people into work. It was in the Work and Pensions Select Committee report of 2018, in particular, that found that some claimant groups such as single parents, care leavers and people with health conditions or disabilities were disproportionately vulnerable to and affected by sanctions. I'll give way to my friend.
Thank the honourable friend for giving way. A few months ago, a vulnerable constituent contacted me after she had been sanctioned because she had missed an appointment, despite being assured she didn't need to attend for very good and sensitive reasons. She was an older woman who had been through extreme trauma with no access to the internet and no mobile phone credit. Does my honourable friend agree with me that a more humanised approach must be taken by the DWP?
Well, I thank my good friend for that intervention. I am going to come into specific case studies that will be very, very similar to what she has just said, and I think that there are clear questions for the Department to answer in respect of that. Going back to the Work and Pensions Select Committee report of 2018, Chair, it also criticised the fact that a sanction incurred under one conditionality regime continues to apply even if the claimant's circumstances change and they are no longer able or required to look for work. It said that in such circumstances, the sanction serves no purpose, and the Select Committee recommended that they be cancelled. It further criticised the fact that the decision to impose a sanction is made by an independent decision-maker who has, and I quote, never met the claimant and who cannot be expected to understand fully the circumstances that led to them to fail to comply. It therefore recommended that work coaches should be able to recommend whether a sanction should be imposed. The Government responded to that report, Chair, and each of the committee's recommendations in January 2019, in particular, agreed to evaluate the effectiveness of reforms to welfare, conditionality and sanctions, and said that this was focused on whether sanctions within the regime within universal credit is effective at supporting claimants to search for work. And it said that it would look to publish its results in late spring 2019. Chair, this did not happen. However, in July 2020, DWP ministers were still saying the department was committed to conducting this evaluation and it would look to do so by the end of 2020. In January 2022, however, The Guardian reported that the Department of Work and Pensions had refused a Freedom of Information request from Dr David Webster to release a copy of the evaluation. And in February, it was reported to the Lords that the Department had not published its evaluation of the effectiveness of universal credit sanctions because it lacked robust legacy data. And the former Secretary of State told a recent Select Committee appearance, in fact it was an answer to the Chair who is here, who had said that she had noted it had been commissioned by a previous administration and explained the notion of a sanction acts not only through its imposition on a claimant, but importantly also through its effect as a deterrent. Now that raises a couple of questions, Chair. I'll give way to the Chair, of course I will.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way and for the points he's making about the Select Committee's report. Can I just pay tribute to him for his work on this subject on the Select Committee, which I understand, his membership of the committee, I understand, is shortly to come to an end. But I thank him very much for all the work that he's done. Does he agree with me that he will have heard the new Secretary of State say that he will want to have a fresh look at whether some of these things should have been published, which the Department has refused to publish in the past? Does he agree with me that this particular report is one that should be high on the list of priorities for being published?
Well, it should be amongst the highest, and I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for his very kind words, and I very do appreciate that, and I have enjoyed working with him. It's a Select Committee that he chairs very effectively. Indeed, and he is absolutely correct that there is a very real question about the reports that are currently unpublished, that should be published, and I will be coming to some of them in my remarks. Chair, I would argue the dogs in the street can tell you the comprehensive picture of sanctions and the effects that they have on people. Or for those not from Scotland, the dogs in the street could tell you the comprehensive picture of sanctions and the effects. And we have a number of case studies here. Feeding Britain and the Independent Food Aid Network asked, when I secured this debate, for case studies and examples. And I have one in particular which I did raise at the Select Committee with the Secretary of State, and that's a Glasgow South West constituent who is diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and severe anxiety. And she has extreme difficulty communicating with others. The local job centre applied a sanction after she had failed to attend in-person appointments, despite the fact that this particular constituent it was agreed 3 years ago as part of an ESA claim. It was acknowledged that reasonable adjustments would have to be made and telephone meetings would be arranged for that particular person. And it does raise the issue of the financial losses that do occur. And the Department of Work and Pensions have actually argued in this case that there was no change of circumstances and that no sick notes were handed in. We have the example, Chair, of an individual in Motherwell, a young mother who had escaped domestic violence, was sanctioned for failing to attend an appointment, despite the fact that she had advised the Department of Work and Pensions that she needed to care for an autistic child on that particular day. In the City of Liverpool, clients have commented that DWP job coach appointments have come through to their phone journals at times when they had no credit for data or access to Wi-Fi. By the time each was able to afford to update their phones and was able to afford to have that data, they'd missed the appointment and been sanctioned. Digital exclusion will increasingly affect clients who are and become unable to afford a basic smartphone and or the contract for data access. And they then face longer journeys to their job centre as a result of one of the busiest job centres in that city, Toxteth, due to relocate, making access harder for local people. In Coventry, we're advised that the vast majority of sanctions are due to people not attending an appointment, but many are now told that their appointments through their online journal So that, again, people with no access to internet are being told that they are going to be sanctioned. In Somerset, we're told of a case of someone with severe mental health and anxiety, and a job coach assured her that any correspondence would go to the carer, the principal carer. Ordinarily, she's informed in meetings of her appointments or via a journal entry. The job coach cancelled. I will give way in 1 second. The job coach cancelled that planned appointment and rearranged a new one, but put it on that job coach's to-do list and not through the online journal. And this is an area that has to be looked at because that person was subject to sanction. And I'll give way to my fellow Select Committee member.
Thank you. Congratulations to the Honourable Member for this debate, but also for all the work he's done on the Select Committee. I just wondered whether he was as concerned as I that this is just a further iteration of the issues that the DWP have had around sanctions going back to 2012. I remember particularly David Clapson, who was the first case that I came across, a former soldier who was sanctioned. He couldn't afford to keep his refrigerator on. His insulin went off and he died as a consequence of that. Is he as concerned as I am of the implications around the potential deaths of claimants as a result of sanctions?
Yeah, I thank my good friend for that intervention. She's done absolutely fantastic work on this particular area, and it's an area in which I support her very much. I am very concerned about the effects that sanctions have and the whole deductions policy have, and that we're actually taking money away from people, and as I'm going to come on to, the effects that then has on cost of living payments, because there's a very real issue in regard to that. I would also add, Chair, that in exchanges I've had with ministers past and present, you can be sanctioned if you refuse a 0-hour contract job. So you could be in a position where you have a secure work but less hours. The department's encouraging people to increase their earnings. So if someone then refuses a 0-hour contract and insecure work, they'll then be subject to a sanction. And then we have the position, Chair, of the DWP staff themselves. Because there are DWP staff, Chair, who have received letters saying that they need to increase their earnings. Well, it's no wonder they're going on strike, is it? Yeah. Because, I mean, there is an anomaly here. You will have DWP staff, many thousands, are paid so poorly that they're claiming the same benefits that they deliver in a situation where they're sharing an office with someone who could then sanction them because they haven't increased their earnings or increased their hours. It's something that really I just find completely and utterly bizarre. And I hope that ministers will have a look at PCS's concerns around that and maybe look at them as a separate case and a separate issue. It would seem to me, if you're working for the departments delivering social security, you shouldn't be taking social security out of those who are delivering that social security. Now, there are food banks across the independent food aid network who are seeing a newly hungry person referred every 3 days on average as a result of a sanction. And so I have a number of questions for the Minister. Does the Minister agree that the current sanctions policy is forcing people to use food banks? And if they're not to be hungry, and to that end, will the Minister undertake to publish the Department's evidence review on the drivers of the need for food aid, which was promised 2 years ago and yet remains under wraps, and is one of the reports that the Chair of the Select Committee has outlined there that remains unpublished and something that we want to see? I also asked the Minister, the Department's own serious case panel agreed at its October meeting that there should be further collaborative work undertaken through the appropriate governance routes to explore strengthening the mechanisms which protect our most vulnerable customers in respect of sanctions. So will the Minister explain to us what that collaborative work will look like and when it will take place? Will the Minister also undertake to commission a study into any correlation that exists between the distance someone lives from their nearest job centre plus and the likelihood of them being sanctioned? The prevalence of poor mental health and vulnerability within households and universal credit, and the likelihood of them being sanctioned, as well as the prevalence of digital exclusion within households and universal credit, and the likelihood of them being sanctioned. We know that the Department have closed job centres. We know that that's made it more difficult for people to attend those particular job centres, and they may be sanctioned. Can the Minister also provide an update on the Department's most recent trials of the yellow card early warning system in 2 areas, and as well as any plans to roll out that system further afield? This is something that I don't accept the conditionality system. But if we're going to have conditionality, it seems sensible to me that there should be a yellow card system or some sort of warning system in place before the decision is made to issue a sanction. And given the present system, which seems to rely heavily on individual discretion as resulting in people being destitute, does the Minister not agree that a fully national rollout of a yellow card system is needed sooner rather than later? As I've indicated, Chair, those subject to a sanction could mean and has meant that people do not receive their cost of living payment. But that decision could be reversed if you appeal and if you win. However, it would seem to me that if there are 6,600 universal credit claimants who have missed out on that first cost of living payment because of sanction, that the Department of Work and Pensions looks at that. That seems to me to be a double punishment. The cost of living payment is there in place so that people can meet their basic living needs. And if they're sanctioned, then it seems that there's something far wrong. And I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Can I agree with my honourable friend that sanctioning people on the lowest of incomes at any time is grossly unfair, but at this time, when even many in well-paid work are struggling to pay their bills, it's obscene. And as we've just heard, and I hadn't been aware of that, so I thank him for that, that means that some people are not getting their cost of living payment that the government says we need to survive. I want to congratulate him on not just for bringing this debate here, but also for asking the questions that allowed me to discover that this summer £153,000 was taken from my constituents by the DWP sanctions. Will he join with me in saying to his constituents, as I am now saying to my constituents in Glasgow North East, if you have your benefits sanctioned, do not take it lying down. Contact me and I will fight this for you, because this is wrong and nobody should have to live on less than the minimum income.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. She's absolutely right. I do join her in a number of points there. We're in a cost of living crisis, Chair. Now, during the pandemic, the Department rightly took the view not to sanction people during the pandemic. We're now in a cost of living crisis. And it seemed to me that if we're not going to sanction people during the pandemic, we should also not sanction people during the cost of living crisis as well. Seems to me to be a sensible approach. And she is also correct in highlighting the great work that constituency office staff do in helping the most vulnerable and trying to see off these attacks. We have all dealt with cases of people being sanctioned. And I think every single constituency office across these islands has had to deal with that. I want to, in closing, Chair, mention some of the staff concerns. There are concerns that job centres are being told by senior managers and ministers to, and I quote, up their game when it comes to sanctions. There are very real concerns about the culture, and certainly there's a view that there needs to be a mind shift into supporting people in what's important, and that punishment has not received anything. The sanctions regime, there is very limited and patchy evidence that sanctions actually work. Inter-office competition, Chair. That statistics are compared with different offices, pushing for higher sanction and deferral rates, and labour market decision makers using box-ticking exercises to do that. And the pressure that they have on the work coaches themselves, tighter timescales, pushing people to physically get into the job centre, and the harms that that would have for the long-term unemployed. And the real effects that has on disabled claimants being thrown into a group of those most likely to get a sanction, and the relative rate of sanctions for claimants with disabilities, that really needs to be explored further. So in closing, Chair, in closing this debate, or in closing this, my opening remarks, sanctions do appear to be back with a vengeance. And this shift in approach requires, I believe, parliamentary scrutiny. As someone who believes conditionality has not worked, I believe we need a change in approach to put the claimant and their needs at the heart of the social security system. But they must accept the Select Committee recommendations to introduce either a yellow card or a warning system, because failure to do so is the Department going back in its word and how it responded to previous Select Committee reports. And I look forward to hearing from colleagues whether they accept, as I do, the need for change and reform, and I look forward to hearing what other colleagues have to say.
The question is that this House has considered DWP policy on benefit sanctions. John MacDonald.
Congratulate the honourable friend for securing the debate, and I concur with all that's been said about his past work, both on committee and generally on this particular issue. I just I would just have a simple question to ask the Minister, really, about what his understanding is with regard to the increase that there's been in this recent period. And it's true, conditionality has always been an element within our social security system since the Second World War, but nothing on this scale. And what's been worrying me is the dramatic increase that there has been since the compared the figures now with the figures before the pandemic, and therefore the significant increase that there has been in this last year after the pandemic, after the worst elements of the pandemic itself. And like others, my experience of the conditionality and the use of sanctions has largely been, the impact has been on my constituents who live the most chaotic of lives and just have difficulty in complying with the various requirements that are made of them. In some instances, actually even understanding the conditions that are attached to them. And living those chaotic lives means that they become intensely vulnerable. At the moment, just to go through the figures again, so I've got this clear, the monthly universal credit sanctions reached a peak in March of 58,548. It's fallen back, so there's an average now of 45,100 in the last quarter. This is 2.5 times the average in the 3 months before the pandemic. So a 250% increase in that period. Sanctions as percentage of UC claimants subject to conditionality are currently at 2.5% per month. In the 3 months before the pandemic, it was 1.4% a month. The monthly sanction rate on unemployed UC claimants in July 22 was higher at approximately 2.8, 1 in 36 claimants, whilst for those planning for work category. The number of UC claimants who were serving a sanction in August was 115,274, after a peak at 117,999 in July. So that's more than 3 times the pre-pandemic peak of 36,771 in October 2019. It just goes on like that. The figures are quite staggering in the scale of the sanctionings that's taking place at the moment. And the average sanction, according to the report by Professor David Webster, I believe for the Select Committee itself, the average sanction is around 11 weeks. For most of my constituents, surviving beyond 11 weeks becomes almost impossible, to be frank.